Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Teaching with Inquiry. Tonight, we are going to keep it a little topical tonight and talking about how to keep it positive in your classroom and how maintaining a positive culture in your classroom during difficult times might be just the thing you need to hear right now. So I know for myself right now in education where I teach, it's a little bit in an upheaval. There are rotating strikes happening. There are disruptions to learning. Just a lot of things are going on. Education is a popular topic to be discussing around the kitchen table and with friends and family and all over social media. And this is having an impact on many, many classrooms. It's really difficult to teach some days when you know that you are having the disruptions. Even though the disruptions may be necessary, it means that you need to adjust perhaps some of the expectations that are happening in your classroom to accommodate the fact that life right now in your room as an educator is not normal, and that things might be happening that you need to contend with, and you might have to deal with things first. And this is especially important, I feel, in an inquiry-based classroom where students have a little bit more autonomy, because you might need to pull back a little bit or change how you're doing things, because right now students might be craving routine and predictive activities instead of, say, more open-ended learning. So how can we still hold true to our inquiry-based pedagogies while also maintaining that positive culture in our classroom? So that's what we're going to dig into tonight. So my name is Patty, and I am a junior grade teacher here in Ontario, Canada, and I come live every single Monday night, and I drop a new video every Monday night at 9 p.m. here on Facebook, which gets rebroadcast into YouTube, as well as a weekly podcast episode as well. So we come and talk about all things teaching and how using inquiry-based teaching pedagogies impacts all facets of our classroom for us and the junior learner, and it is my hope that I can break down some of the barriers for using inquiry-based learning in your classroom and help you to make it more fun and engaging for both you and your students. So again, we're talking about maintaining a positive culture, and that's especially difficult because things happen. Things happen in your classroom that you cannot necessarily foresee are coming, and whether or not that is disruptions or medical leaves or personal issues that might be happening, whether or not there's just a change in the dynamics in your classroom. Maintaining a positive culture is one of the most important things to use, and it does form the basis that allows us to use inquiry-based practices, because we use that positive culture to jump off from. Because we're expecting our students to use independent work skills, we are expecting our students to have autonomy and voice and choice. That is an element of risk-taking that needs to happen within a space in your classroom where students feel safe and comfortable and part of a positive community in order to be able to take those risks and put themselves out there. So sometimes things happen in the environment that get in the way of that, and we need to kind of check in with our students and really work on maintaining that positive culture, even when you have all of these disruptions to learning and you have different events that might be impacting or straining your ability to maintain that as perhaps you should. So I've come up with a few different categories of ways that you can really focus on maintaining that positive culture. And those are things like focusing on the relationship between you and your students, reinforcing and rehearsing those rules and routines, checking in and validating concerns of your students, as well as practicing patience when working with them. So now one of the first things I focus on is really building relationships between me and my students. And I find this is one of those key special sauce ingredients when it comes down to classroom management. When your students feel like you actually care about them, and they feel that you're interested in them, that you care about them, that you are not simply just somebody who's coming in and teaching them, but you genuinely like them and care for them, it makes it much easier to manage your classroom. So therefore, However, when disruptions happen in your classroom, that can kind of put this whole piece off balance. Perhaps you're out of your classroom for a little bit, or something has happened that perhaps disrupts this relationship, or it takes your attention away. And then that could impact that community feeling because the students are feeling disconnected from you. I know myself, being in and out of the classroom for work action definitely means that I am more disconnected from my students because I have less time to have those personal connections with them because I'm not nearly in my classroom enough and I don't see them as much. So making sure that the time I do have with them is going to be, I'm focusing on maintaining that relationship and asking them how they're doing and what's going on with them, and checking in on those little things. Like if I know if one student is really interested in volleyball, I might remember to ask them how their volleyball game was on the weekend or how their team is doing. And just making those little comments to them throughout the time really means to them that I'm focusing on them as people, that it's less about the academics. Because if I'm reduced time in my classroom, I really have to be spending a lot more time on academics, and I might be pressed for time to really build that relationship. So during any of those small downtime moments, it's when I try to make an effort to make those meaningful connections. And I know that during these disruptive times, that making those connections and focusing on the relationship between myself and my students is really important. Now, this is something that I'm always doing all the time. However, in these disruptive moments, regardless of what is causing the disruptions, this is a time where I have to make a concerted effort to do this more so, because I have less time or I have less attention available to be focusing on those relationships. So I need to be very conscious of that. This is what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Now, that's not to say that any of these disruptions are getting in the way of what it is that we're doing, or that we don't need to have sometimes these disruptions. I know right now in education, this strike is vitally important to advocating for the needs of my students so that we actually have less disruptions in my classroom. So although I fully 1000% support the reasons why I'm out in the classroom, I still have to acknowledge that the time I am in my classroom, there are things that I need to be doing to help to maintain that positive classroom environment, even though I have every justifiable reason as to why this disruption is happening. And that goes the same whether or not it's a medical leave or a personal leave. You've got to take care of yourself first. You've got to take care of your own mental health, and your own emotional health and physical health is paramount, because you can't be there for your students if you can't be there for yourself. However, on the flip side of that is you also have to be aware that anytime you have these disruptions, this is a time where you have to be consciously aware of what impact that it's having and plan for it. Throughout disruptions, work on maintaining the classroom culture so that we don't have to completely rebuild it from scratch once it is absolutely derailed. I also know sometimes too that this can feel even personally overwhelming for me, because I have my students just appear needier. They need more attention from me. They need to be around me. They're asking questions that are sometimes to the point where you're like, really? We're asking that kind of question to me right now? Like, I just went over this. But I have to remember that during this time, they're missing that connection piece. And I have to make sure that I can anticipate that these are normal things that are going to happen in this disruptive time. They're just looking for that connection because they're missing it. They need a bit more attention. They could frankly just miss you and just want to spend more time with you. And this is an important thing, that if I'm aware of this is going to happen and I'm conscious of it, that I'm available to do these things with my students, and I'm available to focus on my relationship with them so that they feel cared for and they feel validated and they feel part still of our community, because I don't want them to feel disconnected. So focusing on my relationship with my students to make sure that they still feel connected and a part of our community, and that, you know, their life, not just their academic life, but their whole life matters, and that we're paying attention to them, that they feel seen in my classroom, especially when the time I actually see them might be reduced. Now, another aspect of maintaining that positive culture is really going back to our roots. In September and October, we are often very much focused at the beginning of the school year with establishing rules and routines and really reinforcing them constantly. And as the year goes on, we can relax a little bit and let things just happen a little bit more naturally. We don't have to be as on top of it as perhaps we were in September and October. However, rules and routines and predictability is really comforting to most students. So during times of disruption or chaos, going back and focusing on those rules and routines helps that feeling of comfort. They know what's going to be expected. They know that it's, even though there's disruptions and it might feel chaotic, that they still can rely on that structure that you're putting in place, that you're reinforcing the norms of how you work together. You're reinforcing the rules within your classroom. You're holding them accountable because that's what they can expect. It kind of goes back to that. And especially after a disruption, perhaps if you've been out of the classroom for a while, rehearsing those might need to be important too, because there might be, you don't have the same privilege of having students following those instructions day after day after day. They are in different environments. If they're out of the class or you're out of the class, they've had a different teacher with perhaps different expectations. And if you are returning to your classroom, this is a good time that you are going to be reinforcing those routines so that they know what to expect from you. You are reinforcing what to expect from them, and you're creating that peaceful environment in your classroom where we all know what's expected and we understand that we're going to be held accountable for that. And that alleviates some of the stress and anxiety because it feels organized in our classroom. And that's a privilege that we can give to our students, is when they're coming in and other parts of their life might feel disorganized and out of sync, that at least we're giving them a place where they can be like, okay, these are the rules and routines that I know I can follow. And it feels a normalcy. There's some normalcy in coming back into those routines, and that you're not changing up a lot of things. This is not a great time to be introducing new activities or a new type of learning environment or new rules or any type of activity where they haven't done it before or it doesn't feel familiar. It's probably not the best time to be introducing it now, unless you're really looking for a disruption and you're looking for a change. But if you're looking at just maintaining what you've established, now is a time to just maintain status quo and remember that they just need the rehearsed routines and structures in your classroom to make it feel less chaotic when they're there. And that helps to build that community and maintain that positive culture, because they come in and it feels familiar and they know what to expect and they know what to look for. The third strategy that I will use in times of disruption or a chaotic time period in my classroom are to use check-in and validate strategies. So this is where we are perhaps running community circles where we're sitting and we're actually just talking about our feelings and what's happening and what we're experiencing. And we're just kind of finding common ground together, especially if there's been something difficult that's happened, or there's been perhaps trauma, for whatever range of trauma that might be happening, or there's questions. A lot of the times when things happen in your classroom, students may have questions. It's really hard to move on to some of the academic pieces when their personal needs are not being met. If they've got questions or concerns or frustrations as a community, you really need to put those out on the table and address them. And I find that in my own classroom, using community circles where we all come to the carpet, we sit in a circle, we present a topic that we want to talk about, and then everyone gets to share their concerns and ideas. Now, we definitely have rules about what those community circles look like and what they can say and what they can't say and how we approach our addressing our concerns as a community. We've established norms of what that looks like. But giving them, kind of saying, today is not the day that I'm going to be doing a math lesson because it's not what needs to be done. It's not my top priority. I really need to address these concerns. Perhaps there's been some drama that's happened between groups of students, or there's been maybe a class evacuation, or there's been violence that you need to kind of debrief and deal with because your students aren't feeling safe for whatever reason. A community circle is a great way to be able to address this for your students, as well as it gives them an opportunity for them to be heard. You want to give them a space in which you are listening to them, that they feel as though you are there for them and you can validate some of those concerns and address what's happening and what they're experiencing. And knowing that they feel heard and that you can be that safe space for them, and you can answer questions or you can be the person that they can come to with those concerns, is definitely a good strategy if you're wanting to maintain those positive feelings and positive sense of community in your classroom. And again, this is vital because this is what you're doing in your classroom in an inquiry-based model. You are relying on your students to develop independent work skills. You are relying them to have autonomy and to voice their concerns, to be able to use voice and choice in your classroom. So a lot of that is predicated on the fact that you have a strong set of norms in your classroom and that you have a well-established classroom community. They feel connected to each other and they feel safe in order to take risks. You also want to make sure that they understand that they have a caring adult in their classroom, that they feel it's someone that they can go to. And that amount of trust that they have between their teacher and the student will help them to take that more risks when you're asking them to do challenging tasks within an inquiry model. So the final area that I think is a personal one for me, and this is one where I have to remember that these are different times and that I have to practice patience, and I have to understand that things are going to maybe take a little bit longer, that there might be times where I have something written on my lesson plan, but it's not going to happen because something else is going to happen where we've got to kind of drop the lesson plan and deal with the issue that's at hand, that we've got to sit down and talk about it, that we've got to address it, that perhaps I need to spend time just connecting with a few students and making them feel safe and comfortable in the classroom, and that sitting and doing a quick assessment might need to be pushed off and wait. I find things during these chaotic times take a little bit longer, but I do know as a professional that it's not going to last forever and it's going to be short term, and that eventually we can start establishing new sets of what normal looks like, and we can look at what that happens and we can move back into going kind of full speed ahead through the curriculum. But there are definitely times where things happen where you've got to slow down. And in those moments where you have to slow down, I already feel right now that I really have to kind of pull back and slow down kind of the train that is the learning that's happening in my classroom, just because we're kind of in and out of the classroom all the time. So slowing down and really getting to the idea that I have to be more patient. I have to be more patient, that students are going to need more attention from me. They're going to need more time from me. They're going to need more assurance from me. And I find if I have to remember patience first, that it allows me to be able to handle these moments a little bit easier, because there's always a part of me in the back of my head that's saying, oh, it's February. Why are we still doing the same thing we did in September? Why can't we just be through this? Because I have to get through this and we're going to be short of time. And I feel sometimes that I get a little panicked because I'm like, okay, I've got all these things to do and I'm having, reduced amount of time in my classroom. So how am I going to get it all done? And then if I'm feeling those feelings of anxiety and stress coming up, then if I remember that this is just a moment and I have to really practice patience, and that students are going to need more from me, and it's okay, I can trust myself that eventually the train will pick up speed and we will be able to move on. And if not, I can just accommodate, combine activities, and I'll be able to make it through, and it's okay. But practicing patience not only with my students and realizing what they need in the moment, but also practicing patience with myself through these disruptions helps me to really maintain that positive culture. Because if I'm stressed, my students are stressed. If I'm anxious and frustrated, so are they. And then I can't get anything done at that point. So if I'm practicing patience, it is my hope that as the trusted adult in the room, that my feelings and approach to things, if I maintain a positive attitude and I feel like we can do this, it's okay, we're just going to slow it down, it's fine, then that reassures my students that they have nothing to worry about. I've got it under control. I'm not panicked. And that confidence, even though I might not feel it inside, the confidence in my ability to lead them through this difficult time period is going to help tremendously to establish and maintain that culture throughout my classroom. So this is not just something that happens now. This is something that happens all of the time, where there are going to be disruptions, and it's important that we use different strategies to remember that maintaining that classroom community and the classroom culture within our rooms is going to be paramount to maintaining some of our successes in our goals of using more inquiry-based learning in our classrooms. So I hope this has been a moment where you can reflect on what's happening in your own classroom and how you can kind of hold hard and difficult times and hold fast to what it is that you need to be, what you can be doing in your room. So it is my hope that in these moments of chaos and disruption, as they may occur in our classrooms, that we do our best to maintain a positive attitude, that we are there for our students, that we lead our students through this moment in time, that we can slow down that train and really be responsive to the needs of our students in these moments. Because ultimately, as educators, we can trust ourselves that we can do this and that we have the capacity and strength to lead our students through these turbulent times to maintain a positive classroom, community, and environment, so that when we can find our new normal and what that looks like, that we can just keep on trucking when that gets there and not having to completely rebuild the things that we were building before. So I'd love it if you'd share with me different ways that you are maintaining a positive classroom environment in your room right now. Please share in the comments below, and we can build together different strategies of how we can maintain a positive classroom environment in our rooms. Don't forget, this video is going to be rebroadcast on YouTube and a podcast, and you can find links to all of those as well as all of the other previous videos in this series at www.teachingwithinquiry.com. Are you a member yet? Subscribe now to get access to many free resources and trainings. Go to www.madlylearning.com/membership.